The film opens up with an engagement party at an extravagant hotel, and a woman in her room talking to herself in the mirror. It seems as though the woman is getting ready to go on a date, and she is rehearsing what she is going to say to the man she's supposed to meet, named Ryan. The woman's name is Nancy, and she ends up not going to the party and staying in her room ordering room service. A hotel worker named Andrew enters her room with a table full of food. Andrew is confused about why Nancy is ordering room service and informs her that there's food at the party. However, Nancy explains to Andrew that she has no interest in parties and has decided to spend the night in her room. Just then, Nancy receives a phone call from her sister Elaine, who is disappointed in her for not attending. Elaine continues to try to convince Nancy to put herself out there, and eventually, she listens to her sister and heads to the party. As Nancy walks into the lively room where the party is being held, she is first greeted by Dom, her friend, who is getting married to another friend named Katie. Dom is very glad that Nancy made it and hands her a mojito, and she is then dragged away by Katie, who wants to introduce her to her blind date. Nancy tries to protest, though both Dom and Katie try to convince her that everything will be fine, and that the two of them were set up by friends themselves. Nancy calls herself a loser for being single in her mid-30s, and just then, a man behind her calls himself a single loser in his late 30s. Nancy turns around to see that the man is Ryan, her blind date. Dom and Katie leave the two on their own, and Nancy and Ryan awkwardly introduce themselves. Their first conversation makes both of them uncomfortable and uncertain. Katie, meanwhile, is happy to see her friend seemingly talking with a male, and gives her a thumbs up from across the room. Ryan takes out his wallet when ordering drinks, and Nancy notices a picture inside, inquiring if it's his ex-girlfriend. Ryan corrects her, explaining that it's a picture of his sister. Nancy comments that she's pretty, and Ryan replies that his sister is deceased. Nancy slowly turns away in embarrassment. A disastrous first date, to say the least. Sometime in the near future, Nancy is on a train, speaking to Elaine on the phone. Nancy is emphasizing her distaste at trying to find a partner, and tells Elaine that she should be back home in a few hours. Elaine wants Nancy to get back home as soon as possible, as it's their parents' 40th anniversary, and Nancy is supposed to make a speech. As soon as Nancy hangs up, the lady sat opposite her hands Nancy a book she's reading, telling her that it'll change her life. She's meeting a blind date at the station, and they plan to use the book to recognize each other. Nancy is unimpressed, and the woman tries to convince Nancy to read the book, though Nancy is proving hard to convince. As the train arrives at its destination, a sleeping Nancy slowly gets up, and is surprised to see that the woman has left the book on the train. Nancy tries to chase down the woman, who is walking very quickly towards the platform exit. She ends up getting stuck at the barriers while the woman walks into a bookshop to buy another copy of the book, and Nancy ends up losing her. Just then, a man taps Nancy on the shoulder and starts speaking to her as if the two have spoken before. Nancy is confused, as she doesn't recognize the man, who is likely the person the woman on the train was meeting at the station for a blind date. The man has confused Nancy for the book woman. The man, whose name is Jack, is very talkative, to the point that Nancy is unable to get a word in. Just then she receives a phone call from Elaine, but before she can answer, Jack answers for her, and tells Elaine that everything is fine, and that he isn't a psychopath. Jack does a Hannibal Lecter impression, which makes Nancy laugh, as she watched that movie in her hotel room while trying to avoid going to the engagement party. Jack asks her if she wants to go for a drink, and Nancy happily agrees. Later, Bookwoman stands in the place Nancy was standing with a new copy of the book, not knowing that Jack has mistakenly left with Nancy. Elsewhere, Nancy's parents are out shopping with Elaine and her husband, Adam, for their anniversary party. Adam asks Nancy's father how he's managed to stay with his wife for 40 years, and Nancy's father Bert replies that eventually, after 30 years you give up and from then on, it's easy. Bert is seemingly an alcoholic, as his main concern is what alcohol to purchase for the gathering. And as Elaine tries to explain to her parents why Nancy has not yet arrived, Bert insists that Nancy would like vodka, as it's the only drink she can outdrink him. However, Elaine informs her parents that Nancy didn't even answer her phone, an unknown man did. Bert is pleased to hear this, though Nancy's mother Fran is more concerned. Nancy is enjoying her time with Jack, who is still referring to her as Jessica, and Nancy has not corrected him. Jack then receives a phone call from a friend named Tom, who has called him to ask how his date with Jessica is going, which makes Nancy nervous. Jack hangs up and asks Nancy if they should turn their phones off while together, which Nancy quickly agrees to. Jack and Nancy make small talk. Jack is a marketing manager, and Nancy lies that she works in the city. Jack reveals that he really wants to be a painter, and also expresses how nervous he is feeling about his first date, admitting he isn't aware of what constitutes an appropriate dating chat. He also reveals that it was his friend Tom who set him up with Jessica, which makes Nancy even more nervous, and is delighted when Jack changes the subject to grabbing a drink. The pair buy drinks, which Jack pays for without thinking twice, a contrast to Nancy's experience with Ryan. Nancy is caught off guard when Jack brings up Jessica's ex-boyfriend, Pete. He apologizes to Nancy for what Pete did to her, though she tries to play it off by saying that it wasn't too bad, though in reality, she has no idea what Pete did. Jack goes on to reveal that he is divorced, which doesn't shock Nancy, though she is relieved he isn't grieving over a deceased sister like Ryan. Nancy and Jack enjoy their day together, though at many moments, Nancy is horrified upon the realization she cannot pretend to be Jessica for long, as Jessica, unlike her, is 10 years younger and competes in triathlons. Later in the evening, Nancy and Jack are at a bar together. Nancy is about to confess to her pretending to be Jessica, however, before she can come out with the truth, Jack suggests they go bowling. Nancy loves bowling, so she keeps her mouth shut. Nancy and Jack thoroughly enjoy their time at bowling, so much so that they begin attracting the attention of onlookers due to the ruckus they're causing. They eventually sit at the bar and order more drinks, and when Nancy goes to the bar, she is stopped by a man who works at the bowling alley. The man's name is Sean, and the two of them attended the same school together. Nancy, however, is still pretending to be Jessica, so she pretends to not recognize him. Sean goes on to remind her that he gave her a Valentine's card once, which she ripped up and was almost run over by her mother. Nancy gives in and apologizes, though she still tries to keep Sean from raising his voice, in case Jack hears someone refer to her by her real name. Nancy rejoins Jack, but Sean walks up to the pair and hands her some nachos. Jack calls her Jessica again, and her cover is busted. Nancy explains the situation to Sean and admits that she's finding it difficult to come clean. Though Sean isn't sympathetic, instead he sees it as an opportunity. Sean blackmails Nancy and gets her to agree to kiss him, or else he'll reveal Nancy's deceit to Jack. Nancy reluctantly agrees, as Sean states that it has been a lifetime ambition of his. He has been creepily obsessed with her. Meanwhile, Bert and Fran are getting ready for the party, and Elaine is frantically trying to find out where Nancy has disappeared off to, as Bert is very much looking forward to Nancy's speech. Later, Nancy leaves Jack to go to the ladies' room, while he thinks of what they can do together after bowling. While there, Nancy is trying to get something out of her teeth when a hand grabs her leg. The hand belongs to Sean, who is in the ladies' room in only his underwear, determined to get a kiss from Nancy. She attempts to leave, creeped out by Sean's pursuit of her. However, Sean again reminds her that he'll reveal her secret to Jack. This has the desired effect, and Nancy reluctantly agrees to kiss Sean. But just before she can do so, Jack walks in and sees Nancy with a near-naked Sean. Jack explains that he became worried as Nancy was taking too long, so came in to check on her, but did not expect her to be in here with Sean. Jack is thoroughly confused, so without saying much, bids Nancy farewell and tries to leave, but Nancy stops him. Sean asks Jack to take it easy on Nancy, but before he can realize it, he uses Nancy's real name in front of Jack, who is now confused. Sean leaves the room and Nancy finally comes clean, admitting to Jack that she is not in fact Jessica, but someone who was given a book by the real Jessica, and coincidentally ended up standing in the spot the two of them were supposed to meet. Jack is appalled at what he is hearing, and begins to question everything Nancy has told him about herself. The two of them argue about the situation. Nancy becomes very defensive about everything Jack is grilling her for. Then as they're leaving the bowling alley, Jack realizes that he left his bag at the bar, as did Nancy with her notebook. Jack calls a taxi, though Nancy is adamant they can get to the bar to collect their belongings quicker if they walk. However, Jack disagrees, and the two of them decide to race each other back to the bar to see who is right, out of sheer pettiness. They both end up getting to the bar at the same time, and Nancy ends up throwing up before they can enter. Nancy hurries to the ladies' room while Jack is left on his own to search for their belongings. Nancy opens her phone up to see that she has received 10 missed calls from her sister, so she calls her back to no answer. She stares at herself in the mirror, takes her shirt off, and asks herself why she's such a loser. Nancy goes back to the bar, where Jack is still waiting for her, and as she walks back, Jack asks her if she really even likes bowling. Nancy, now less defensive, reveals that she does indeed like bowling. The two of them laugh at all the things they've experienced today, and he calls her an idiot, to which she agrees. Just then, couple walk up to Jack and Nancy and the woman angrily demands to know what he is doing. The woman is revealed to be Jack's ex-wife, Hillary, and the man's name is Ed, whom Jack despises. Hillary and Jack argue over their supposed agreement, that during the time one of them is at the bar, the other is not. Jack, in turn, introduces Nancy to his ex-wife, lying that Nancy is his girlfriend, and that the four of them should double date tonight. Hillary and Ed reluctantly agree, and even though Nancy hates the idea, Jack reminds her that she owes him for pretending to be Jessica. Meanwhile, Elaine is at her parents' anniversary party, growing more worried that Nancy will end up missing the speeches. She expresses her concerns to Adam, who tries to assure her that Nancy will be fine, and that she's doing exactly what she wants her sister to do, to find herself a man. Jack and Nancy have drinks with Hillary and her partner, Ed, and conversation is anything but pleasant. The two of them cannot come up with a credible story on how they met, but they settle on Nancy being a firewoman who came to put out a fire in Jack's building one day. Hillary seems unimpressed with Nancy, while Jack keeps antagonizing Ed. Eventually, Jack goes to the bathroom, and while he's away, Hillary apologizes to Nancy, explaining that Jack is using her to blackmail Hillary. This doesn't sit right with Nancy, as it seems as though Hillary is looking down upon Jack, when she's the one who cheated on him. When Jack gets back from the bathroom, Nancy is more enthusiastic about playing the role of his girlfriend, as she's seen Hillary for what she is. She begins explaining in detail how good her and Jack's sex life is, much to Hillary's dismay. Nancy continues with the details until Hillary cannot take any more, and Hillary ends up demanding the divorce papers from Jack, who apologizes for using a pen to sign them instead of his blood. Nancy gets fed up with the tension between Jack and Hillary, and has Jack come up to the dance floor with her, where she tries to calm him down. While dancing, Jack and Nancy debate if marriage is even worth the trouble. Nancy uses Jack's marriage with Hillary as an example of why it doesn't work, though Jack takes offense to this and ends up leaving Nancy mid-dance. Nancy ends up searching for Jack, even going into the men's room, in which she's met by many confused stares. She finds Jack sitting in a cubicle, hunched over on a toilet, weeping to himself. Nancy shuts the door and apologizes to Jack, expressing her sympathy. Jack admits that he needs to move on from Hillary. She is more than happy without him, though he breaks down crying again. Nancy replies that it isn't Hillary that Jack is trying to hold on to, but rather the feeling of how it felt being married to her, and comments that Hillary herself doesn't seem so happy in her new relationship. She goes on to reveal that she's only been single for 4 years herself, and prior to that, she was in a 6-year relationship with a man she considered the love of her life, but said man ended their relationship suddenly without any real reason. But the thing that really got her was that this former loved to authorize Nancy from his iTunes, which makes Jack laugh. This cheers up Jack, and he asks Nancy what she really does for a living, but this time the truth, to which she replies that she's a journalist. Later on, the two of them meet up again with Hillary and Ed, who are arguing about their sex life because of Nancy. As they get back, Hillary obnoxiously asks if the two of them were busy getting intimate in the men's room. Jack and Nancy inform them that they've decided to head home for the night, though Ed is adamant they stay a little while longer. The pair reluctantly agree, and Nancy convinces Jack to promise himself to move on after they down their first shots. Just then, Nancy accidentally spills vodka on Ed's sleeve, which ends up hitting a candle and catching fire. Hillary screams for Nancy to put out the fire that has enveloped her boyfriend's arm, as she lied to them that she was a firewoman. Nancy is handed a fire extinguisher by the bartender, and she accidentally sprays it all over both Nancy and Ed, covering them in foam. Jack and Nancy run out of the bar, laughing as they run towards the train station. Jack feels invigorated, asking what they should do next. Nancy replies that she should really be getting back home, as it's 10 p.m. and her family will be wondering where she is. Jack agrees, and as they walk into the station together, he opens his phone up to messages from his friend Tom, asking him if he wants to meet Jessica again. To Nancy's disappointment, who was just about to invite Jack to her parents' anniversary party, Jessica is open to trying to meet Jack again. Jack asks her what he should do, should he meet Jessica, or not. Nancy gives him no answer, and Jack is bemused as to why now she decides to be silent. Nancy's disappointment is clear to see, though she suggests that Jack does meet Jessica and bids him farewell, noticing they're standing under the exact clock where Jack was supposed to meet Jessica anyway. Nancy and Jack shake hands, and before Nancy can pull away, Jack pulls her closer and kisses her on the cheek. As Nancy walks towards the gates, Jack shouts that he'll Facebook her, to which Nancy responds that she's not on Facebook. The two of them whisper, "idiot," under their breath, as if to call themselves an idiot. Jack is sitting at a table with Jessica, and they both comment on how crazy it is that someone pretended to be her. She is extremely chatty, and Jack drinks a whole beer bottle while listening to her speak. Jack quotes a movie named Wall Street, though Jessica doesn't understand the reference, very different from Nancy, who understood the reference straight away. Meanwhile, back at the Pattersons' residence, Bert gives a speech on his daughter's behalf, as Nancy was supposed to be the one to give the speech. Bert expresses his love for his wife, and how grateful he is that she's with him. Though before he can finish, Nancy walks in. Cheers erupt in the room as she walks in, but before she can answer, she bursts into tears, and everyone runs to comfort her. While talking with Jessica, Jack reveals his grand plans for home renovation, which prompts Jessica to think that he's some sort of artist. Jack disagrees, even though he told Nancy that he wants to become a painter one day. As they talk, Jack realizes he has very little in common with Jessica. She, in turn, states that she's happy to meet someone who is a fan of the same book, and that she's sorry that she was late to meet him, as she gave her copy to a woman she met on the train. Jessica goes on to say that she believed that the woman needed the book, and that she seemed very sad inside. This touches Jack, and he realizes that Nancy may have been hiding her own pain while trying to help him with his. Jack suddenly rushes for a taxi, and Jessica is surprisingly supportive of him trying to meet Nancy again, mostly because it proves she was right, and that her book, which she's an obsessed fan of, helped Nancy meet someone. However, Jack realizes there is a problem. He hasn't got Nancy's contact information, though Jessica states that everyone is connected somehow, and that they may have some mutual friends. Jack immediately has an idea, and thanks Jessica as the taxi drives off. Jack arrives at the bowling lane looking for Sean, who is playing pool while still wearing the scarf Nancy was wearing, which Jack gave to her. Jack asks Sean if he knows where her parents live. Sean replies that he knows the exact coordinates on Google and takes out his car keys. Sean drops Jack off at Nancy's parents' home and drives off, and Jack is weirded out by the whole encounter. At her parents' home, Nancy is crying, banging her head against a wall as her family attempts to comfort her. They are confused as to whether her date with the mystery man went well or not. Elaine asks Nancy if this is the same man she briefly spoke to when she called her earlier in the day, who assured her that he's not a psychopath. Suddenly the doorbell rings, Adam goes to answer it, and Nancy is confused as to why Sean is at her door. It is revealed that Sean purposely gave Jack the wrong address so he could go to meet Nancy himself. Meanwhile, Jack is stuck looking for Nancy at a party full of students. He asks for Nancy, and the whole crowd reply that they're all Nancy. Jack is thoroughly confused, as he still believes that he is at Nancy's parents' 40th anniversary party. Just then, a young man in the crowd comes forward and states that Nancy Patterson was his babysitter, as Jack helps a girl who is being sick at a sink. Jack asks the young man if he could take him to Nancy, to which he agrees. Jack punches the air and sprints out of the house towards Nancy's parents' home, followed by a large crowd of students. Back at the Pattersons, Sean is trying to cuddle the unresponsive Nancy, who is letting him do whatever he pleases right now. Her family watches the two together, and to them, it seems as if Nancy has finally found a caring man. Bert eventually gets up and announces that his daughter Nancy would like to give a speech, which he himself has been looking forward to all day. Nancy reluctantly gets up and admits that she had a speech, but lost it, as Jack accidentally took her notebook instead of his own. Nancy comes clean in front of everyone. She admits to meeting a man, who isn't Sean, and pretended that she was the girl he was supposed to meet when she knew the truth. Everyone in the room is shocked, Elaine more than anyone. Unknown to Nancy, Jack is frantically running towards her parents' home as she expresses how upset she is, but she's also proud of herself for trying. Fran and Elaine give Nancy a hug, and Adam asks where Jack is now. Nancy is shocked to see that Jack is at her window calling her name. Jack rolls through the window, and the whole room is stunned into silence as the crowd of students cheer him on from outside. He asks Nancy if he can give a speech, and she agrees. Jack expresses his own regret for not taking a chance when the opportunity presented itself, and curses himself for being blind to what he had in front of him the whole day. Jack admits he believes that if Nancy didn't pretend to be his day would have been terrible, as would have been the rest of his life. The two of them kiss, and everyone cheers as they get on with the party, dancing away the night.